Hello, everyone. I'm Jamey Lutz, author of Pathway to Purpose, Big Ideas for Fueling Irresistible Corporate Cultures. The worst advice I ever got was stay in your lane.
Stay in your lane. Jamey, you are the first person that ever shared their worst advice. So, welcome to the show. I'm glad you're here, but stay in your lane. That's bad advice. Tell me why.
Well, I think it can be pretty decent advice, but it certainly doesn't feel kind of lend itself to co-creation, collaboration, creativity. Yeah, somebody told me that one time, and I don't think they were mean-spirited, but I think it really shuts down the doors for that creativity that we all have kind of inside of us. So I took it for what it was worth, but I think generally speaking, if you, quote, stay in your lane, you'll never stretch yourself to go outside of your comfort zone.
There you go. Yeah, it's hard to get promoted if all you do is just the job that's asked. It's hard to be an entrepreneur if all you do is just a little job. So yeah, so staying in your lane. I'm gonna guess writing a book that wasn't part of your lane, was it?
That was kind of going a little bit out of my lane. I was pushing myself on that one, but it certainly, in the end, I'm very glad that I did it because if I would have stayed in my lane, I probably would never have published a book.
Yeah, that's cool. Well, it's interesting because 15 years ago, 20 years ago, I was an IT manager, and writing a self-help book was the furthest thing from anything that was in my lane. So I definitely didn't stay in my lane either. Talk to me about how you got inspired to write this awesome book. Congratulations, by the way, my friend.
Oh, thank you very much, Phil. I appreciate that. Well, it was kind of a thing that happened over a lot of time. I always felt like kind of, and I talk about it in my book, I've been really, really blessed, fortunate to work with some amazing companies that are really renowned for service excellence, employee engagement, but from a cultural perspective overall. And as I kind of grew up and was in a number of these kind of great organizations, I was like, I really feel like I've got stuff inside of me I need to get out. I need to share with the world what amazing culture looks like, and how do you like design that? And so that led me to write the book. It was a labor of love. It took a long time, but looking back on it, I'm definitely glad that I dove in and made it happen.
Awesome. I'm glad you did too. It's interesting you say that, it was something that was inside of you that you wanted to share. I know one of my mentors, Ron Munz, said that there's two things that he wants to do every time he goes to a conference or is at an event. He said the first thing is he wants to pick something up, right? He wants to learn something. And certainly I know that, as a lifelong learner yourself, that's important. But you said the second part, and this is where a lot of people miss, and this is where I missed it first, and that is we want to drop something off, right? We want to help other people that are going to come after us with that. So who was the early mentor in your life who said, Jamey, you need to get this out of your head, man. You can't just be smart all by yourself.
Wow. So there were a lot of folks on the road, on the pathway, if you will, but I would say, as it came to writing my book, I think I had a really good friend from college that encouraged me, and I'd kind of shared, this is something I'm thinking about doing. And he's like, well, don't just think about doing it, just go out and do it. And so, once the most challenging thing is getting started. So once I got started, the ball kind of moved, and then it moved some more, and I'm like, holy smokes, Phil, I can like actually finish this thing. And we had this pandemic, and it was like, I was at home, whether I wanted to be or not, and it just kind of came together. So that one friend, and there were a number of them, but that one friend specifically is like, no, don't just talk about it. You need to go out and do it. And so I did.
That's awesome, man.
Yeah.
That's so awesome. Yeah, we always need that one person who believes in us, maybe even before we do, to help us get moving in the right direction. So as we shift from that kind of mentorship to mentorship as a leader, you talk about irresistible corporate culture. So what does that mean, Jamey? Can you define that for us so we understand and frame the conversation in the right way today?
Yeah. So I believe that we're all hardwired to want to make a difference, right? That we don't want to, inside of us, we don't want to just make a living. But we want to make a difference along the way. And so that's what I mean by irresistible is what does it take to create organizations that our people, our teammates find irresistible and our customers find unleavable. And so that's what I mean by irresistible. It's like you can't imagine not being a part of that organization. And it sounds lofty. It may even sound corny, but obviously, and I talk about this in the book, there's a lot of organizations out there that have created that type of culture and that type of atmosphere. And that's why I wrote the book. I wanted to share about that.
Wow. I love that. So teammates find them irresistible, that teammates want to be there, and also the customers piece that they find that unleavable. So which comes first, Jamey? Is it customers come first or employees come first, or they have to come at the same time?
I would say that it always has to start internally with the hearts. You want to try to capture the hearts and minds of your employees. You go back many years, 30, 40 years, the service profit chain was something that was talked about, and it still rings true today. And it basically just says, look, if you start with happy employees, then they're going to go out of their way to create outstanding experiences for our customers. And if our customers are happy, obviously, in terms of top line, profitability, et cetera, they're going to want to continue to use us, and they're going to want to continue to give us their share of wallet. So I think it has to start with the employee, because if I'm not happy as an employee, what incentive, what motivation would I have to go out and make my customers happy?
Wow. Yeah, I completely agree. Early on in my career, I missed that. I thought that customers came first, and I probably sacrificed some team members where I didn't need to. But I've certainly learned over the years, happy employees give better milk, right? They are happier, right? So coming from Wisconsin, that's more of a Wisconsin joke than it is calling employees cows. That's not what I'm trying to say there, right? But coming from Wisconsin, that's probably a funnier joke for me. But I think about that, right? I think about that, and I think about employees first. So let's talk about that. Let's break that down. How do we intentionally get started creating this irresistible culture? What's the first step?
Yeah, the irresistible part is, as a leader or the leader of an organization, you have to determine what type of culture you want. So what are your core values as a leader, and how do you plan to instill that with your people? Because if you don't know what your values are, if you don't know what your purpose is, it's highly unlikely that you're going to be able to instill that into your team members. And so it all starts with those leaders, and it all starts with something I call burn the boats. You've probably heard of that. There are things that are non-negotiable. And when I used to work with Ritz Carlton, and we used to say, we will move heaven and earth on behalf of our customers. Now, they may have to pay for it, but we will do anything it takes to make sure that their experience is world class. And so, it all starts with putting a line in the sand. As long as it's not illegal, immoral, or unethical, hey, we're going to do what it takes. Now, they may have to pay for it, but we're going to do what it takes.
Yeah, that's so interesting, right? Because so many times, just the default answer is no. But truly, if people want something, they will pay for it, or they'll realize, well, maybe they don't want it as badly as they thought they did. So that's really, really interesting. I really, really think that's super, super important. So give us another example. I know that you've worked with Pat Williams from the Magic and stuff like that. So give us another example of how that plays out, Jamey.
Yeah, I mean, so I'll give you an example of, working with the Magic. Part of my role many years ago was creating that irresistible experience for our fans. They had a minor league hockey team. They, of course, had the Orlando Magic. They had a WNBA team and a health and wellness facility. And there were, many cases where I was kind of responsible during the games for service recovery. And, for whatever reason, you're always going to have fans that are not happy, not just because of the product on the floor, but something else perhaps wasn't going well. And I can remember numerous situations where fans, season ticket holders, during the game came and voiced a frustration about something. And, you have to really be willing to listen to them in the moment, and not try to necessarily solve the issue before they get it off their chest, because that's really a period of insanity when they are first upset. The thing is, you don't, customers generally are okay if you're not able to resolve the issue, as long as they feel like they're being heard. And that's the really key thing I found when it comes to dealing with customers, is you have to connect with them on an emotional level, and spell out for them what you can and can't do. You're right. It's generally it's not about saying no, N-O, but it's more often about no, K-N-O-W, right? It's about helping them understand the situation, that you care, and here's what I can do, or here are some options. Let's talk through those.
Wow. It's more about K-N-O-W than N-O. I think that's so strong, right? We have an opportunity there to really zero in first on what the problem is, right? Because we want people to know that we hear them, we value them, we understand them. That, to steal Covey's terms, right? We want to seek first to understand, right? And then, okay, here's what we can do. Here, I'd like you to know what we can do for you, and here's the options that we have. But then, right, don't we have to deliver that? I mean, as a leader, sometimes, Jamey, do you find, or maybe you haven't, that sometimes leaders, they might say that, but then they actually don't deliver that? How does that destroy a culture?
That's the kiss of death, really. I mean, to offer to do something, say you're going to do something, you're better off to not have ever said it to start with, because you are in essence trying to instill trust with whether it's an employee, a fellow employee, or a customer. And there's no quicker way to destroy a culture when you destroy that trust. And I'm sure you're familiar with this term, Phil, psychological safety. There is a psychological safety that we generally talk about in terms of employees, where there is an environment where they feel comfortable being creative, saying what they truly believe without fear of any type of retribution. But psychological safety plays a big role in dealing with customers too. If they trust you, if they believe that you're working on their behalf, then they are more likely to be forgiving. They're more likely to give you the benefit of the doubt. However, the problem is when you say that you'll do something and then you don't do it. It's very, very difficult, as you can imagine, to recover from situations like that. And we've probably all been in those types of scenarios.
Yeah, that's like the opposite of service recovery. That's like leadership recovery, because it's done. You often don't recover from that. That ends up leading to teams that leave you, and you almost have to start over with a brand new team once they stop trusting you.
That's right.
So yeah, so let's talk about, though, how we drive accountability. One of the pieces in your book you talk about is driving accountability, but how do we do that for leaders, not just for line level employees? Because so often we talk about accountability. Oh yeah, I want my team to be more accountable. But let's talk about leadership accountability and how we get there.
Yeah, and I think that's a great question, and it's such a huge issue. Accountability has such a negative connotation in our society. But here's what I believe. I believe that the best leaders, the best line people, the best employees, they want to be held accountable. Because if you're not held accountable, you don't know what the scoreboard is. And if you don't know what the score is, then there's nothing more deflating than not knowing how you're performing and how you're doing. So I think it's the leader's responsibility to set those goals, to set those expectations up front, and to fairly, but without reservation, hold your people accountable to it. Now, there's something on the opposite end too. So I say it's two sides of the same coin. People want to be held accountable, but they also inherently want recognition. So I think it's really, really inherent on us that it's not just the old school command and control accountability. It's also, hey, I see the job that you're doing. I see what you're working on. And I want you to know, I think you're on the right path and I appreciate what you're doing. But at the end of the day, I think nothing happens without accountability. That's what pushes us to greater heights. And if we don't hold our people accountable, this may sound odd, but I think we are in many ways forsaking our leadership responsibilities, because that's how people grow.
Absolutely. Well, as a leader, we're accountable for their accountability, meaning we have to set, reset, reframe, measure, and then help develop those, those ideal behaviors that help them succeed, right? That help them grow. Because I think you're absolutely right. People want recognition. They want to be promoted. They want more money. They want, some of them, however they want recognition, some want private, some want public. Each person is a little bit different, but everybody does want that. They want their leader to say, I see you. I see the work you do. I see the efforts you put in. I see the impact that you have on our organization. So have you had, leaders that have helped you see this accountability, Jamey? Where did you learn this?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm probably, Mike, like most people out in the audience, I've had both sides, right? I've had people that practiced accountability with a hammer and others that practiced it in more like a helper, right? I want to help you get to where you want to go. But there was a particular manager I had some years ago that was really, really stringent about accountability and setting goals and meeting those goals. But they were also very heady about, let me help you get there. What's holding you back? How can I, as your leader, help you succeed and reach your goals as well as the organization's goals? And when you've got somebody like that in your corner, I mean, the sky's really the limit. And then you align that with what I'm doing. I feel like my purpose is aligned with the corporate or the corporation's purposes. Then you've got an individual and potentially a team that's going to knock it out of the park, that's going to do exceptional things.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I've often heard that the job of a leader is to remove obstacles and to carry us forward through the hard times. So I dig that. And I think the good part about doing that is that word does get out. And you talk about in your book here, in Pathway to Purpose, one of the sections is about attracting exceptional talent. And I think nothing attracts talent more than being the roadblock remover, right? Being the person that cheers for your team. So talk to us about the importance of that and how you've seen that show up in the work you've done, please, Jamey.
Yeah, and the thing that's so compelling about that too is, and I talk about this in the book, there's so much research out there that says, no one holds more influence over an individual outside of a spouse or a loved one than a manager or a leader. And that's a huge responsibility. So I think you're right. Our role as managers, as leaders, is to clear the path. It's to make the path clear for our people to be successful. Now, sometimes there may be a tendency to overprotect our people. But I think we're also doing them a disservice when we try to do that as well. We've got to open up the opportunity for them to be the best version of themselves. And it's our role as a leader to make that possible. So I've had, as I'm sure you have, Phil, numerous examples of those people in my life that instilled that sense of accomplishment. I'm going to push you. I'm going to push you really hard, but I'm doing it in your best interest so that you can be successful and so that you would achieve what you may not have otherwise achieved without me as a leader. And I think we all want to look back someday, and for those people that we led, we want to believe and we want to hear from them that, hey, you were challenging, you were tough, but you also loved me. You also pushed me, and I would never have gotten where I was today if it weren't for you helping get me there.
Yeah, I think that's so true. And I think what's interesting about that is when we do that, we help our team then share with their friends and their loved ones and the people that they encounter, hey, this is a place that you should maybe consider wanting to work at, and making it far easier to attract the talent. And you talk about in your book how we have to begin within when we're doing this recruiting. So talk to me a little bit more about how we begin within and create that irresistible culture that people then are sharing, and then that attracts those employee referrals.
Yeah, so, the essence of beginning within is starting with yourself. And, I don't get to decide whether I'm a leader or not. You don't get to decide. It's the people that we lead that decide that. We have to be worthy of leading. And so it starts with ourselves, and I think part of that is determining what kind of leader do we want to be. And I recommend in the book that people take inventory of that they actually define, this is the type of leader that I want to be. And I really think it's invaluable to share that with your people. So write a couple of paragraphs about the type of leader that you intend to be, and ask your people, am I being that type of leader? I'm going to hold you accountable, but hey, I want you to hold me accountable too, to being the type of leader that you want to follow.
Wow, that's so interesting, right? Because that is a level of leadership bravery that often isn't seen. I mean, we get hit with these anonymous 360s, when in reality, if we opened up that conversation and we admitted that perhaps we're not as good of a leader as we'd like to be, but this is what I aspire to, I'd love for you to hold me to account for these things that I'm saying to you are important to me. Well, perhaps then our team might lead us to being more than we thought. Have you seen that being true, Jamey?
Yeah, and I think that, again, that's where that psychological safety comes into play, right? So if I'm willing to make myself vulnerable and articulate the type of leader that I intend to be, and that I want to be, not just on behalf of myself or the organization, but on behalf of the people that I work with, that's a true difference maker. And they will take that vulnerability, and they will begin to open up, and you will begin to understand what makes them tick, right? And when you understand them on a personal level, and they see you as an advocate for them, again, that what you can accomplish is that state of irresistibility. And I've seen it happen in some of the great organizations that I've worked with and that I've studied. Those leaders are willing to step outside of themselves and put themselves on the line on behalf of their people.
Yeah. Well, that is the definition of a great leader, right? Someone who's willing to put themselves out because they know that they've mentored their team, because they know that they've helped them become even greater. So lots of awesome stuff in the book, Pathway to Purpose, Jamey. But as we kind of wrap here, I want to talk a little bit about the last chapter in the book, and that is preserving the irresistible. Because I think it's one thing to create a culture, it's another thing to preserve it. So talk to me about how we can preserve that irresistible culture once we've made it.
Yeah, I think it goes back to the burn the boats. We've got to stay true to what we believe are the differentiators, the non-negotiables within our organization. And unfortunately, I think a lot of organizations look at culture and they look at it as a race and not a marathon. It's a never-ending kind of experience. It doesn't end. And so it's not a program du jour where you focus on one topic one month and then you focus on culture the next month. It's an ongoing thing. So you have to continue to have your hand on the pulse of what your people are thinking, obviously what your customers are thinking. And we've got to continually evolve with the demands of our employees and our customers. So I think more than anything, Phil, I think it's an understanding that, this is not a 3-month initiative or a 6-month initiative or even a year initiative. It's an ongoing, this is who we are, this is what makes us tick. And we may change our goals, we may change our objectives, but really, if you've picked the right purpose and the right core values, those should sustain you throughout. And so you've got to make sure you're hiring for that. You've got to make sure that your people are continuously aligned with that. And if you remember to continue to stay the course, that culture will not erode. But that's the key. And it all starts with, the CEO and the leaders that kind of make it happen. They've got to continually roll that down to their people on a daily basis, so that it doesn't become rote, so that it doesn't become dull. You got to make them understand what it looks like. What is, it's one thing to say we're customer oriented, or we're all about our employees, but anybody says that, right? I mean, we've got vision statements on in boardrooms in nice frames all over the country, but if your people can't articulate it, if they can't explain what it looks like in real life, street level terms, it's not going to last if it ever was real to start with. So you just got to be relentless.
So how do we do that, Jamey? Let's get a little tactical here. How do we do that? Because I agree with you. I think it's important to be relentless. But as a leader, right, if you're hearing this for the first time and you're like, ooh, I really want to drive this down, I really want to do this, how do I do that on a daily basis without sounding like an automaton?
Yeah, well, the best example I can give is at Ritz-Carlton. And our core values were wrapped in an 8.5 by 11 Credo card. And within the Credo, you had the service standards, you had the employee promise, you had the mission and the vision of the organization. And every day that got reinforced as part of a huddle, a 10 to 15 minute huddle that was a combination of a pep rally and a combination of let's talk about who we are and what makes us unique at Ritz-Carlton. And so every day you would cover a service standards or one of the items that's on the Credo card, but it wasn't about memorizing it. It was about enlivening it. It was about bringing it to life. And so every day you would say, okay, our service standard for today is I'm involved in the planning of the work that affects me. That was one of the 12 service standards. Susie, tell me what does that look like? How are you involved in the planning of the work that affects you? What does that look like on a daily basis? How can we help you feel more involved in your work? So that sounds kind of simple, but I'm telling you, Phil, that one Credo card, I believe, was the main impetus to make Ritz-Carlton one of the greatest quality customer service employee engagement companies in the world. So, there's something to be said about reiterating or reinforcing things over and over and over. And we know, research tells us that kind of becomes over time your DNA. So you've got to continuously talk about what's important, enliven it in the sense of tell me what it looks like. And then you've got to constantly have your hand on the pulse of what your employees are experiencing, what your customers are experiencing, and all of your key stakeholders. If you do those two things, you're well on your way to creating an irresistible culture.
Awesome. Well, it starts with understanding, right? Who the heck you are, what is non-negotiable. I really dig that. And then over and over again, embodying that, sharing that, asking questions, and sharing stories so everybody can see that credo, if you will, live inside them to create that irresistible culture. So really awesome stuff, Jamey. Dig your book, man. Lots of great stuff in here. Folks can get it at jameylutz.com. That's JameyLutz.com. But Jamey, if folks have questions, if they want to connect with you, where else would you send them? Where else could they find you hanging out?
Yeah, the traditional channels. Feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn or Facebook, also on Instagram as well, but you can look me up, and would love to interact, would love to get your feelings about what we've talked about today. And gosh, I'm sure there's plenty of things that I could learn from our audience as well. But Phil, such a great opportunity to talk about this, and you're one of my favorite people as it relates to podcast, and I'm just excited and jazzed that hey, I got the opportunity to hang with Phil today.
Oh, well, you're so kind, man. Well, congratulations on your book, Pathway to Purpose. It's a fantastic book, folks. You should get a copy. It's at JameyLutz.com. That's JameyLutz.com. Thanks for listening, everyone. And Jamey, thanks to you, my friend, for spending a little time with me today. I really
My
appreciate it.
pleasure. My pleasure.